Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest battle you will ever fight is not in the marketplace, not in competition, and not in the world outside of you. The greatest battle is fought in the workshop of your own mind. Every victory you will ever experience begins as a thought. Every defeat you will ever suffer also begins as a thought. If you master your thinking, you master your destiny. The mind is the place where every victory or defeat is first decided. Long before a person rises or falls in the world, the decision has already been made in thought. The body only follows the instructions given by the mind. If the mind is trained to expect success, it will search for ways to succeed. If the mind is trained to expect failure, it will discover reasons to stop trying. Life does not begin with action. It begins with belief. Every habit, every attitude, and every choice grows out of repeated thinking. A person may change surroundings, companions, and even occupation, yet if the same patterns of thought remain, the same results will appear again and again. This is why two people can face the same circumstance and produce completely different outcomes. One sees opportunity where the other sees defeat because the battle has already been settled in the mind before the situation is ever touched by the hands. The mind accepts whatever it is repeatedly told, whether that message comes from others or from within. Fear, doubt, and discouragement enter quietly and establish control when they are not challenged. Once accepted, they begin to direct behavior without being questioned. This is how failure becomes organized. Success is organized in the same way, through thoughts of confidence, persistence, and purpose. The battlefield is not visible to the eyes, yet it is more real than any external struggle. When a person learns to observe their own thinking, they discover that most defeats are self-inflicted through careless acceptance of negative ideas. A mind trained to think clearly does not allow rumors, past mistakes, or the opinions of others to decide its course. It examines each thought and asks whether it strengthens or weakens the will to act. The difference between those who achieve and those who drift is not talent or luck, but control of this inner battlefield. The person who wins the struggle of thought gains command over emotion, impulse, and reaction. Instead of being driven by moods, they are guided by intention. Instead of responding to fear, they respond to reason. The mind, once disciplined, becomes a powerful ally instead of a hidden enemy. It learns to reject discouragement before it takes root and to replace it with ideas that support effort and progress. Every problem becomes training for this discipline, and every challenge becomes an exercise in mental control. When a person understands that success and failure begin as thoughts, responsibility shifts inward. No longer is blame placed on circumstances or people. The real work becomes the management of belief and expectation. A weak thought repeated becomes a strong habit. A strong thought repeated becomes character. The mind cannot hold two opposing beliefs with equal force at the same time. It will always act in harmony with the dominant one. For this reason, daily thinking determines daily behavior, and daily behavior determines long-term results. The battlefield of life is therefore not outside in competition, economy, or chance, but inside in the silent choices of what to believe, what to fear, and what to pursue. The person who learns to govern this battlefield gains an advantage that no obstacle can permanently defeat. Fear is the most common enemy of clear thinking, yet it often disguises itself as logic. It speaks in the language of caution and pretends to be wisdom, but in truth it is only an emotional reaction searching for justification. To think correctly, a person must learn to distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. Facts are fixed and provable. Fear is flexible and invented. It exaggerates danger, shortens time, and convinces the mind that one attempt will define a lifetime. When fear is accepted as fact, it gains authority over action. When it is questioned, it loses its power. Most people do not fail because the facts defeat them. They fail because their fears speak louder than the evidence. A single setback is interpreted as a final verdict. A single criticism is treated as permanent judgment. This is not reasoning, it is emotional habit. Correct thinking requires the discipline of asking simple questions. What do I actually know? What can I verify? What am I assuming? The moment these questions are applied, fear begins to weaken because fear cannot survive examination. It thrives only in vagueness and uncertainty. Facts show what is. Fear predicts what might be. The mind that confuses the two becomes trapped in hesitation. It waits for perfect conditions that never arrive. It avoids risk by inventing danger. It postpones effort by magnifying possible loss. Yet every worthwhile achievement demands movement in the presence of uncertainty. The person who separates facts from fear understands that uncertainty is not proof of danger. It is merely the absence of complete information. Action based on facts produces learning. Action blocked by fear produces stagnation. Fear also borrows from the past. It takes old failures and presents them as future guarantees. It ignores growth and experience and treats yesterday's weakness as today's limit. Correct thinking does not deny past mistakes, but it refuses to turn them into permanent elbow. AWS, it recognizes that experience changes capacity, and that effort alters results. The fact is that no two attempts are ever identical because the person attempting them is never the same. The world does not reward those who feel brave. It rewards those who think clearly. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to treat fear as truth. When fear says something cannot be done, facts must be consulted. When fear predicts humiliation, evidence must be demanded. When fear warns of failure, reason must ask whether failure is certain or merely possible. Possibility does not justify paralysis. Probability does not cancel effort. Only fact should guide decision. A disciplined mind records facts and ignores noise. It studies results instead of rumors. It learns from outcomes instead of from imagination. This habit gradually changes the quality of action. Decisions become calmer, effort becomes steadier, energy is no longer wasted fighting invisible threats. The person who thinks this way becomes difficult to intimidate because they respond to reality, not suggestion. They are not controlled by headlines, opinions, or emotional pressure. Their confidence is built on understanding, not illusion. To separate facts from fear is to reclaim authority over one's own mind. It is to surrender action to emotion. It is to replace reaction with judgment and impulse with direction. When this habit is formed, thinking becomes a tool instead of a trap, and the mind becomes an instrument of progress rather than a factory of doubt. Every action begins as a thought, and every repeated action becomes a habit. What a person does repeatedly is not the result of chance, but of dominant thinking. The mind builds patterns through repetition, and these patterns slowly harden into automatic behavior. When a thought is entertained again and again, it stops feeling like an idea and begins to feel like truth. In this way, thoughts become the architects of conduct. A careless thought, when repeated, becomes a careless habit. A disciplined thought, when repeated, becomes a disciplined habit. The daily choices of thinking shape the daily rhythm of behavior. Habits are the visible evidence of invisible thinking. They reveal what the mind has accepted as normal. A person may wish for different results, yet continue to think in the same way and wonder why nothing changes. Change does not begin with effort alone. It begins with a new pattern of thought that demands a new pattern of action. The mind prefers familiarity, even when familiarity produces discomfort. This is why old habits persist. They are protected by old thoughts. To break a habit, the thought that created it must be challenged and replaced. Character is formed through the accumulation of habits. What a person does under no supervision is the product of what they think about themselves and their purpose. The mind, once trained in a certain direction, pushes behavior along that path with little resistance. This can work for or against success. If the dominant thought is weakness, the dominant habit will be avoidance. If the dominant thought is strength, the dominant habit will be effort. Destiny is not shaped by single acts of heroism or failure, but by the quiet repetition of daily choices guided by belief. The world often judges people by their results, but those results are only the final stage of a process that began in thought. A mind filled with doubt produces actions filled with hesitation. A mind filled with purpose produces actions filled with direction. The habit of thinking correctly is therefore the most valuable habit of all. It stands behind every other discipline and determines whether they last or disappear. A person who trains the mind will eventually train the hands, and he will. Habits do not resist change because they are strong. They resist change because they are familiar. The mind must be given a new picture of itself before behavior will change. A new identity produces new conduct. When a person begins to think of themselves as capable, their actions start to align with that idea. When they think of themselves as disciplined, their routines begin to reflect that belief. Thought leads and behavior follows. There is no sudden transformation without prior mental preparation. The shift may appear quick on the surface, but it has been prepared through repeated inner decisions. Each time a person chooses a higher thought over a lower one, a new habit is being built. Each time they refuse an excuse and act on purpose, destiny is being shaped. Habits may feel small, but they carry the weight of the future within them. The direction of life is determined not by what a person hopes for, but by what they think about consistently and act upon repeatedly. A mind without a clear purpose is easily distracted, easily discouraged, and easily influenced by outside opinions. When there is no definite aim, thoughts move in many directions at once, and energy is scattered instead of concentrated. The person may work hard, yet achieve little, because effort without direction is like motion without progress. Purpose gives thought a destination. It tells the mind what to look for, what to ignore, and what to organize around. Without it, thinking becomes reactive instead of intentional, and decisions are made according to emotion rather than design. A definite purpose acts as a filter for ideas. When a goal is clearly defined, the mind begins to measure every thought against it. Useful thoughts are kept. Useless ones are discarded. Doubts lose their power because they no longer match the chosen direction. Confusion fades because the mind has something to serve. This is why people with clear purpose often appear confident even when they lack resources. Their confidence does not come from what they possess, but from what they have decided to pursue. The mind naturally seeks order, but it cannot create order without instruction. Purpose provides that instruction. It teaches the mind to connect effort with outcome and sacrifice with meaning. A person who knows what they want is less disturbed by obstacles because obstacles become part of the process instead of signs of defeat. Problems are no longer personal insults, but practical challenges. Thinking becomes strategic instead of emotional. The question changes from why is this happening to me to how can this move me closer to my aim. Indecision is the enemy of organized thinking. When a person hesitates between many directions, their thoughts compete instead of cooperate. One idea pulls forward, another pulls backward, and energy is lost in inner conflict. A definite purpose ends this struggle by choosing one direction and committing to it. Once the mind accepts that direction, it begins to align memory, imagination, and reason toward the same target. This alignment creates mental efficiency. Effort becomes focused, and focus produces results. Purpose also disciplines time. Without an aim, time is filled with activity, but not with progress. With an aim, time becomes a tool. Each day is measured not by comfort, but by contribution toward the chosen objective. This changes how the mind values actions. Small steps gain importance because they are connected to a larger vision. Delays become temporary, not permanent. The mind stops wandering and starts building. Many people think they lack motivation, when in truth they lack direction. Motivation is born when the mind sees meaning in effort. A definite purpose supplies that meaning. It tells the mind why persistence is necessary and why discomfort is worthwhile. When purpose is absent, effort feels like punishment. When purpose is present, effort feels like investment. This difference is not physical but mental. The power of purpose lies in its ability to organize belief. It gives the mind permission to expect achievement. It replaces vague wishing with deliberate intention. A person who fixes their mind upon a clear aim begins to think in terms of solutions rather than excuses. They search for methods instead of reasons to stop. Their thinking becomes structured, their actions become consistent, and their progress becomes measurable. In this way, purpose does not merely inspire thought. It arranges it into a working system that supports action and directs energy toward a chosen result. The mind is like a gate through which ideas enter and leave, and whatever passes through that gate repeatedly will shape behavior and character. Every suggestion accepted becomes a command to the subconscious, and every repeated command becomes a habit. For this reason, the quality of a person's life is closely tied to the quality of the thoughts they allow to remain. Negative influence does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly through casual conversation, repeated complaints, and constant exposure to doubt. When these influences are not resisted, they begin to feel normal, and what feels normal soon becomes believable. Doubt is not always born from failure. Often it is borrowed from others who have already surrendered to it. A person may begin with confidence, yet lose it through constant association with fear-based ideas. This is why guarding the mind is an act of self-respect. It means choosing carefully what to listen to, what to repeat, and what to believe. The mind cannot be empty. If it is not filled with constructive thought, it will be filled with destructive suggestion. Silence without. Intention invites weakness. Attention without discipline invites confusion. Negative influence feeds on repetition. One discouraging thought may pass unnoticed, but 1,000 of them create an attitude. The same is true of strength. One thought of confidence may seem small, but repeated daily, it builds resistance to doubt. The person who protects the mind understands that thoughts must be selected, not inherited. They refuse to accept the emotional moods of others as personal truth. They absorb before they absorb. They question before they agree. In this way, they become thinkers instead of receivers. Guarding the mind also means controlling inner dialogue. What a person says to themselves in private becomes their loudest influence. Words spoken inwardly carry more authority than words spoken by others because they are believed without argument. If that inner speech is filled with criticism, the mind begins to work against itself. If it is filled with encouragement, the mind becomes a partner in effort. This inner conversation must be guided with intention. The mind must be taught to speak in the language of effort instead of excuse, and in the tone of possibility instead of defeat. Doubt weakens action by weakening belief. It does not always stop effort completely, but it reduces its intensity. A person who doubts will act cautiously, expect little, and retreat quickly. This is why doubt must be challenged at the thought level before it reaches behavior. The mind must be trained to replace uncertain ideas with deliberate ones. When a doubtful thought appears, it must be examined, not obeyed. When a negative influence is encountered, it must be filtered, not absorbed. This habit builds mental independence. To guard the mind is to decide what kind of thinker one will be. It is to choose strength over convenience and direction over drift. The person who does this consistently becomes difficult to control through fear or opinion. They act from judgment rather than impulse. Their confidence grows not from external approval, but from inner stability. Over time, this protection of thought becomes natural. The mind learns to reject what weakens it and to accept what strengthens it. In this way, guarding the mind is not resistance to the world, but mastery over reaction, and freedom from doubt becomes the foundation of deliberate living.